Please be seated. As you've gathered now from our prayers and the kids' message and the readings, today is the Sunday which we call the Good Shepherd Sunday. And we are now halfway through the season of Easter, believe it or not, longer than Lent, and we are already halfway. And so this theme of shepherding stands in the middle of the season to help us understand that we're now shifting our focus from reflecting on the new life that Jesus experienced and embodied and showed to his disciples in all these stories of his appearances that we read, to now the idea of our own new life. So his new life becomes ours, but what do we do with our lives, so to speak, in recognition of this transformation and sort of a second chance, or many, many chances that God gives us to make something great out of our lives based on our faith and purpose, the way we understand it. And so this is what all of what I just said, you could call it by one term, vocation, right? The sort of the meaning of life that's active, that defines what you do with your time based on faith, on some conviction of purpose. And so the other word for the Sunday is Vocations Sunday. And traditionally, on this Sunday, the church held ordinations of priests and deacons because their life's purpose, their vocation, imitates the shepherding that Jesus attributes to himself. So Jesus says about himself, I am the good shepherd, among many other things that he says I am about himself. And so the vocation we as the ministers in the church have imitates his. And that's why we call clergy pastors in some traditions, which literally means shepherds. Now, I would say that this is not to say that pastors or ministers are like God or gods, and then lay people are like sheep. You know, a sheep, that word can have rather unflattering connotations. Someone who follows blindly, for example, or is completely dependent on a guide, cannot think for themselves, will fall off the cliff at any chance, doesn't know how to find green grass. I don't think it's quite like that. I think in the scriptures, yes, the sheep are meant to illustrate our utter dependence on God, but in that culture, in that context, it's not a negative. It's just a metaphor of ultimate dependence. Likewise, shepherding, which seems maybe a little foreign or outdated or archaic to us, to the people who wrote the scriptures was a very clear image of leadership, very specific kind of leadership that they saw amongst themselves and read about in their Old Testament scriptures, where every prominent patriarch, king, some of the prophets were in fact shepherds. So it was a very specific model of leadership that is represented in that image of a shepherd and his or her sheep. And I think the church leadership, in its best sense, is represented well by this image. And I would say it's the image of the good rather than skilled shepherd that I, for one, try to emulate and maybe construct in myself to do the best I can in my job. And I would say the two qualities of a shepherd that define a good one rather than a skilled one, for me, based on all the different references in the scriptures, of which there are so many, are that a shepherd cultivates a stance of attentiveness, noticing. That's why, for example, when Jesus was born, it was the shepherds who witnessed his birth or were the first ones to see the baby. It's because it illustrates that when you cultivate a stance of noticing, to those who have the eyes and the attention, God is revealed. Okay, so attentiveness coupled with a care that is relational, that is based on knowing each other truly. And when you truly know each other, the self-giving component, the shepherd knows his sheep and lays down his life for them, as Jesus says about himself, the self-giving follows the true knowing. You can't not behave that way if you know somebody. And you can't be truly self-giving. It would be fake if you didn't truly know somebody for whom you care. So, attentiveness and true connection, relational care, is to me what defines a good shepherd and defines my vocation. And my liturgical anniversary of ordination falls actually, we celebrated it last week. Thank you so much for providing an incredibly tasty cake and remembering it. And so that was my calendar ordination anniversary to the Order of Priesthood, which was in April. But because Easter is variable, Good Shepherd Sunday can be anywhere from April to May. And it so happens that I was ordained a deacon and a priest in subsequent years on the same liturgical observance, which was Good Shepherd. So while the calendar dates differ, I basically get to celebrate 3 times, right? So, but because it's too much cake, I tend to do it on just one day, and to me, I take the liturgical anniversary as the one that sums it all up and reminds me of the qualities of the Good Shepherd that I should ideally try to foster in myself. Now, this year, however, the diocese chooses to hold confirmations today at the cathedral this afternoon. And the ordinations of deacons, among whom Jonathan will be ordained, will be next weekend. Now, of course, confirmations and ordinations both fit with the theme of the Good Shepherd very well. So that's why there is some variability as for how things are done. And I will attend Jonathan's ordination next weekend, as I hope many of you will, and then hopefully Lutzen's the year after. But this afternoon, I will present 2 of the children from our parish at the confirmations. And the 2, of course, illustrate, the 2 sacraments illustrate the notion of attentiveness and connection that I mentioned as the qualities of the Good Shepherd, in how these individuals who will today be confirmed in their faith, or how the priests who are ordained choose to live their faith, with parallels, right? So to be confirmed does not mean to graduate. To be ordained does not mean to say this is it. In fact, both sacraments show that this is the beginning of a more intentional living in the church. Whether it is as a layperson who is confirmed and now will learn to shepherd others, to be connected and attentive to others as a layperson, or as an ordained individual in the tasks that we get to do. But both involve listening to God, both involve ongoing transformation and walking with others as a kind of a pilgrimage. And neither of them imply an overnight change that happens in that rite. They just recognize the treasure that we kind of all hold in our hearts. And we're now able to see it. So the connection with others, the capacity to connect, the capacity to pay attention to others is already in all of our hearts. It's given to us. We just need to learn to notice it, use it, employ it for God's purposes. It reminds me of a book that I know of, where the main character is a shepherd. So the book is called The Alchemist. It's written by Paulo Coelho, who is a Brazilian artist or writer writing in Portuguese, but the book has been translated into over 100 languages because it illustrates such archetypal themes as this idea of a journey and attentiveness and noticing and intuition, and it's all in a shepherd. So this shepherd boy in Spain is the key character, and his name is Santiago, which is significant. And so this boy dreams of finding a treasure. And he sells all his sheep, just like that little Bo Peep in the kids' rhyme gave up her, well, but she lost the sheep, but he ethically sells the sheep and sets out on a journey to the Egyptian pyramids. He thinks he can find a treasure there. And along the way, of course, he goes through many trials and setbacks and discoveries, and then he comes home to realize that the treasure was real, but it was buried where he started. And that is the ultimate metaphor for, I think, all of our sacraments in the church and our idea of vocation, in that none of them create new life. They just help us to understand one that's already in us. And the name Santiago, of course, in Spanish, is the equivalent of Saint James, the saint of pilgrims. And there is an ancient pilgrimage route, in fact, a whole network of them in Spain that converge in the northwest corner of Spain, which is where the author who wrote this novel had a transformative experience. So Camino de Santiago literally means the way of Saint James. It's a route that many people take to undertake a journey of self-discovery. Do they find their treasure at the cathedral, that is the destination of the route? No. Of course, they find it in their hearts. So I find it an interesting coincidence that of course, we all dream of finding a new version of ourselves somewhere at some point. As a priest, or as Jonathan's now looking forward to his ordination, as a deacon, he might think, well, when I'm finally ordained, or as Lutzen is waiting, when we're ordained, we can be this. As I was a deacon and waited for my priestly ordination, I was, of course, excited and didn't want to wait so long, and I kept thinking, well, once I'm a priest, then I'll be this. We think that way about marriage. Well, if only, or if only I found somebody to be with me, or if when I graduate. So we have these ideas that when we finally become this or that, then we will be the best version of ourselves. But really, the journey is the treasure in many ways. And the journey is only to live into the best version of what or who we already are. So coincidentally, to illustrate this with a real life story, just as I was pondering this novel about the shepherd who undertook this pilgrimage to the pyramids and came back and found the chest of gold where he started, my husband told me a story he had just learned. Just as I was thinking about the novel, he said, did you know there was this American millionaire art dealer who buried a treasure, a chest of gold and gems, worth over $1 million, somewhere in the American wilderness, wrote a poem about it, self-published it. The poem contained clues to where to find the treasure, and thousands of people undertook the search. It created quite a frenzy among those who knew about such things. Several people died, for which the person was blamed because he sort of put them in a dangerous situation, it was said. But eventually, one person did find the treasure, possibly, and as it was auctioned off, many people came up with their stories that talked about how they, even though they weren't the ones to find the chest of gold and gems and the $1 million that went with it, they discovered that they were transformed by the search, that they had new ways of connecting with family members as a result, that they learned new skills, that they spent time in nature, that they grew stronger or wiser, or learned to train dogs that helped them look for the treasure. So their lives were much more enriched in one way by the search for the treasure than that of that one individual who might have found the gold. So the metaphor of the quest for something that's already here is both an archetypal theme and shows up in real life in so many ways. Now, of course, none of us can find this treasure on our own. So, of course, in the novel, the boy Santiago, named after the pilgrim saint, has guides too. One is borrowed from Genesis. His name is Melchizedek, and he is the person who in the Bible appears to Abraham, an immensely successful shepherd of a great flock. And there's a biblical scene where Melchizedek gives him the bread and the wine and the blessing to help him on the journey to the promised land, to send him off, so to speak. And so in the novel, there is a Melchizedek who helps Santiago in the same way to name his dream and to pursue it. So who in our lives has helped us to name our dreams, to discern them, and to have enough strength and courage to help us pursue them? I think it's worth reflecting on it. Sort of who is our shepherd, our guide, and to whom we can maybe even, write 20 years later and say thank you for that. Because of course we can see it better in hindsight. The road is always more clear to us when it's behind us. And then in the novel, there's another guide to Santiago who helps him to come home. His name is the Alchemist, which gives the novel its whole title. So the author titles the novel not after the main character, but after his guide. And if you remember what alchemy is, it's an attempt to convert regular metals into gold. So again, the theme of transforming something ordinary into something divine is conveyed through the name of this character. Where in our lives have you seen this kind of a transformation? How do regular experiences of loss, pain, difficulty, sacrifice, difficult relationships out of which something beautiful grew, where do we see that? And who helps us through it? And do you see God as your guide? Sometimes, as a shepherd who helps you find direction, but you're still responsible for your transformation? Or do you see God as the alchemist on whom we rely to do the work for us? God, can you take this pain and make something beautiful out of it? I think all themes hold together because God is greater than any human representation of him. Even this metaphor of a shepherd is so rich and so full. So, to circle back to the shepherding theme and to the theme of vocation, yes, the clergy are pilgrims that walk alongside their flock, and experience everything that the flock does together. And our task may seem like doing the ceremonies, offering the bread and the wine like Melchizedek did, blessing, guiding, perhaps creating services, putting on special events, visiting people. So all of these practical skills and tasks, yes, we are responsible to do them, but our main job I think, in imitation of the shepherd, the good shepherd, is to notice new life, to be attentive to it, to discern it through real connection, through really knowing the people, recognizing each other's voices. We don't make this happen. We just help people see their dreams and pursue them. And the community overall, to see its well, not destination, but more the pilgrimage, the treasure already in us. We recognize it together, and I see it as my role to help all of us to find it, and most importantly, to appreciate what we already have. So Santiago says in the novel something interesting. He says, I may be stronger than I think I am. No, well, something about his strength. So I may be strong enough, and I know a few tricks, and I have perseverance. He describes himself like that. So I would say I know a few tricks of trade. I have learned a few skills along the way. Jonathan and Lutzen are picking up skills at great pace, but we remember the greatest alchemist of the universe, who is not us, who is God working through all of us, through all our skills, converting them into the gold of eternal value. And in that regard, the ministers, the shepherds, are no different from the flock, and all of us may discern our own vocation as guides and alchemists to others. Thanks be to God.